everyone, welcome back for part 3 of our Mountain Mist Hat knit along. My name is Megan Young. I'm the owner of the Village Yarnery, and this is my YouTube channel, Mego Makes. If you are just tuning in, then you missed a couple videos, which is perfectly fine. You can find them. I will have links to them in the description of this video. But this is the hat that we are making, the Mountain Mist Hat by TinCanKnits. These are individual patterns that they sell, but it's also part of their Strange Brew book. And this is our winter knit along for 2020, the first knit along that we're doing this year. The follow-up to this is their Mountain Mist sweater. So this hat is functioning both as a knit along and a gauge swatch. So let me just briefly say, if you hear children in the background, that's because my children are with me and playing and making noise. So just either enjoy it or ignore it, whatever works for you. I am using Cascade Aegean Tweed for this knit along, and I'm using Chalgu needles. And if you've been watching and you're curious about this little mat that we have here, this is a fiber from a local alpaca farmer that she wove into mug rugs, and I just love it, and it works wonderfully as a great little backdrop. But we do have the materials in the shop that you can make some of this yourself, just in case you're wondering what that is. So in video 1, we went over the cast on and the ribbing, and we also briefly touched on the magic loop. In video 2, we switched from our ribbing needles to our needles for our body, which in this case was just from here to here with our knitting. And I also showed you the modified magic loop or the traveling loop, which is something that you can also do. So today, in this video, we're going to begin our color work. Now, if you need more in-depth help on color work than what you get in this video, you are free to come and see me at the shop, and I would love to help you with that. But let's get started. Now, if you watched any of my videos in the past, or if you watched the intro to this video, it looked that I was knitting in a funny manner. That's because I'm a Portuguese knitter, so that just means that I hold my yarn a different way. Everything comes out the exact same, I just hold my yarn differently, so don't be confused by that. You would still knit in the manner in which you knit. So if you knit English style or throwing, then you do that way. If you knit continental, then you do that way. So I am gonna look at my work here, and I have a stitch marker here. This was my first row of my body that I knit, and so I'm counting to make sure that I have the appropriate number of stitches. And I do apologize, it is kind of dark. Actually, it shows up a little bit better on my camera than it does in person. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I just finished that last row. Now I am ready to switch. Now your pattern at this point does not tell you to switch to another size needle. Your pattern tells you to use a needle for your ribbing and then a needle for the body of your work. But since we are doing color work, and color work tends to be tight, you are going to want to go up at least 1 more, if not 2 more needle sizes. I have already knit this hat, and I got gauge with that, so I know that I just need to go up a needle size. So I'm going to be moving up to a size 7 needle. This is currently a size 6. Now I am just at this point going to switch my right needle to a size 7. And I will continue with my, oh, I need to put that in the right way, don't I? I will continue with my left needle being a size 6 until I get completely around the work. That way I do not have to worry about any difficulty with the needle fitting back in the stitches, since these stitches were knit on a size 6. So I remove my beginning of the round marker. I will put this back, I will put it back in whenever I get back over to this point. Since I'm knitting in the traveling loop method, actually, I lied, let me change that. I have my needles over here, That's where I just happened to stop and start this last time. So I will put my beginning of the round marker here. I'm going to make my beginning of the round marker a different color than the rest so that I know that this is my beginning of the round. And I'm gonna try and slide this needle. See, it's a little bit tricky to get that bigger size back down in those stitches, but I wanna get that back down in there. And so I'm going to look at my chart. And I do not like to show you guys too much of the pattern in this because I do not want to take away any credit from Tin Can Knits, but just to briefly go over the chart here, if I can make sure that the camera is seeing this. This is the color chart that we're having, that we're working on. So I'm just gonna go over this here because it tells you what the colorways are. My colorways are obviously different, but I have already chosen my main color, which was my green, contrast color 1, contrast color 2, and contrast color 3. Your chart notes here, it says read all chart notes, chart rounds from right to left. So what that means is that you're going to be reading from right to left. So you're going to have one of the yellow, which would be contrast color 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the contrast color brown, and so on and so forth. So the really important thing, whenever you're reading this, to read a chart, you are going to repeat these 12 stitches of row 1, because we're on row 1 of the color work. You're going to repeat this however many times your pattern tells you for whatever size you're going to make, okay? So you'll want to look at your pattern and see that. So let's get to it and I'll show you what I'm gonna do. So my contrast color 1 is my purple. So I'm actually switching things up. This is what I've knit so far. This white is the green. Then this green will become purple, and then this will become brown, and this will become white. And that is how I'm going to knit mine. So whenever you are doing color work, yarn dominance is very important. And essentially what happens with yarn dominance, and there are lots of different YouTube videos, lots of different articles that I encourage you to read that will help you further understand this. But what happens whenever you're doing color work, you're knitting with 2 colors in one row. One color is always going to stand out or pop and be more dominant than the others. Excuse me. When you're doing color work, one color is going to stand out or pop more than others. Now, when you're doing something like this, where you don't have a whole lot of design within this color work, it doesn't matter as much. But if you get into something where you're adding several different designs into your color work, or if you have what's called the lice stitch, which is you get a lot of sweaters that have the lice stitch, so you'll have let's say that the sweater is red and then you have lots of little white bees all through the sweater. You want to have those white stitches pop out so you can see them and so that they don't fade into the background. So that is all determined by where you hold your yarn. One strand is always going to be, sorry, let me pull this up again and let me show you my floats here. So when you're doing your floats, one strand is always going to be under or beneath the other one. So if you look at this, the green is always beneath the white here. The green is beneath the white. So that tells me that in this section, I had the green be dominant. And what that means is because it's traveling underneath, there's more yarn and there's more stitch, and that's gonna allow the green to pop out a little bit more. So when you're looking at this, the green does stand out a little bit more than the white. That, again, not a huge amount of importance with this particular knit. The important thing is to decide what yarn you want on your left and what yarn you want on your right and stick with it. So I am going to be doing with my green being on my right, so it's going to be my main color, and my purple is going to be my contrast or my dominant color. Those are synonymous. So what I mean by on your left and on your right, let me show you. Now, whenever I add a new color, I make a little slip knot and I put this on the stitch. This will not count as a stitch, or I put this on the needle. Does not count as a stitch, but it just helps to hold it there. Now I am going to knit this first round in the English style, and then I will switch to my Portuguese knitting, so please don't be confused by that, okay? So purple does not count, okay? So I have my purple yarn is more here to the left, and my green yarn is more here to the right, okay? There. You can actually hold one yarn over to your right and one yarn over to your left and knit this way. And if you can do it this way and be consistent this way, then you're gonna help prevent your tangles. I cannot do it that way. I do it, well, Portuguese style, but not this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do it English style. So according to my chart, I'm going to do one stitch of my purple. So I'm going to insert my needle in, going to grab my purple, not my tail, but grab my purple, and I'm going to knit that stitch. And then I have 5 stitches of the green. So I'm going to insert my needle into knit, I'm going to drop the purple, and I'm going to make sure and pick up my green from the right, and I'm going to knit 5 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I have 1 more purple stitch. So because I'm getting ready to begin another purple stitch, I'm going to spread my stitches out here on my needle so that my float does not become too short. If your float is the part of the yarn, let me pick up this hat again. Your float is this, these little strands of yarn that float along the back until you use that color again. If these are too tight, then your stitches will pucker, everything's gonna look all wonky, and your end project will not fit, okay? So I knit my 5 stitches. Now because I want my purple to be from the left instead of just, so here's your options. I could just reach down and pick up the purple, and some people might do that, but I will reach down underneath and grab the purple so that the purple is consistently moving underneath this green. Okay, so I will knit a purple, so I'm gonna throw my green over there, pick up my purple, and knit that. And again, I'm gonna look and see that this is stretched right here, okay? The other option would be if this were all bunched up and way too tight and short, and so that's gonna keep all of those stitches bunched up there. That is not what I want at all. So I stretch that out, and then I will drop my purple, and then I have 5 more green to knit. 1, whoops, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that should be 1 pattern repeat. So if I count my stitches here, again, this is just where I added that purple. It's gonna get dropped off whenever I start back, so I'm not gonna include that, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm gonna take another stitch marker and mark that, and that is 1 pattern repeat, okay? So every time you get to the end of a pattern repeat, you're gonna wanna do stitch markers. I do just want to take a minute to say that using stitch markers is a very smart thing to do. It's going to allow you to knit more successfully. It's going to allow you to knit faster. You can focus on what's happening just in between the stitch markers instead of trying to keep track from, okay, the beginning of my round and I have to count so many stitches. And if you get distracted, I have kids, I get distracted, or if you get caught in the middle of something, or if there's a mistake, it's much easier to look in between here to find the mistake. So stitch markers will help prevent you from making mistakes, but if you make a mistake, it will help you find it faster. So there's one section. So I'm going to start the next section, which was, it's a repeat of this. So 1 purple, So I'm going to reach under and grab my purple. And now I'm going to make sure and stretch that out over the needles so it's nice and stretched. 1 purple, and then I have 5 greens, so I will pick up my green. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if I'm just going to continue to work in this as I talk, so I'm going to reach down and grab this purple. I've spread my stitches out, so I will knit 1 purple stitch. If the whole idea of yarn dominance is confusing to you, that's fine. The important thing is, you know, you will continue to learn it as you continue to progress in your color work. The important thing to remember is what yarn you keep on your left side and what yarn you keep on your right side, and do that consistently, okay? Yarn dominance will make more sense as you continue to go. Your most important thing is being consistent with where your yarn is and the size of your floats so that it doesn't pucker. So there's 1 purple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green, 1 purple, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green. That should be another pattern repeat. So I will pick up another marker and add this there. So I'm going to continue to work on this pattern. I will continue to roll the video for a little bit so you can watch me do a round, and then I will talk again whenever I get back to the beginning of the round and how to progress to the next section. But I am going to switch over to Portuguese knitting so that my gauge and everything is consistent. So don't be confused by this. I'm still just knitting. I'm just knitting my Portuguese style. So that was my last pattern repeat, because there's my beginning of the round stitch marker. So now I am going to remember how I only switched over to size 7 needles here. If you forget to switch over your other needle, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I remembered to this time because I've knit a whole outfit or a whole project with 2 different size needles. Your right needle is what really counts. So I'm going to make sure that I have the right needle size. Yes, that's a size 7. And put it on here. All right, so that's on there. I'm gonna get the yarn back on my fingers the way it needs to go here. This is just how I hold my tension. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to row 2. Slip that beginning of the round marker over. This was that first stitch. There's the slip knot. That wasn't even a stitch, rather that was my slip knot. So I'll just slide that off and it drops off, and there we go. And then I'll have that end to weave in whenever I'm all done. So round 2 is 2 purple. Oh, see, so that's stretched out a little bit there, and that can happen, which is why I put a slip knot on in the first place. So I'm just gonna grab that stitch and give it a little bit of tension there so I can knit into it. So 2 purple, 1, 2. Now I can drop that down. And I'm gonna give this just a little tug to make sure that the tension on that float is good, that it's not too long. 3 green. 1, 2, 3. 3 purple. 1, 2, 3. 3 green. 1, 2, 3. And again, oh, I don't think that I gave that green enough. I didn't stretch that out. I don't like that float. So I'm just going to knit backwards, also known as tinking. All right. So I'm going to stretch those stitches out there and then knit my 3 green. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Stretch them out, and 1 more purple. That was 1 12-stitch repeat. So I'll start that again. So I'm going to continue to knit around here, and I want to show you guys, since I'm doing the traveling loop method, I want to knit around and show you guys how we are going to stop and start right here. Really, it's not any big deal at all. So I will see you guys there in just a second. Okay, so I am here about to do my last stitch, which would be green. So I'm going to do that green stitch. Now I have no more stitches on my left needle, and all of them are on the right needle here. And it looks confusing because I've got my yarn in the way there, but all I'm going to do is pull my right needle on through, slide the stitches onto my left needle, grab my right needle and loop around. And it does not matter where this happens in the pattern repeat. So just like I showed in the last video, it doesn't matter at all where this happens. So it can happen, I prefer for it to not happen at a stitch marker, like where the stitch marker is just supposed to be. That way I don't have to worry about the stitch marker dropping off of my cable, but this can happen anywhere. The important thing is whenever you are doing this is to make sure that your float doesn't get too tight. I don't have to worry about that. I had 1 green stitch there. I have 2 more green stitches to do. So I'm just going to knit 2 more green stitches. And then I have 3 purple. So that's stretched out. 1, 2, 3. So on and so forth is what we're doing here. So I'm going to continue to work on this. I will meet you guys back in just a second where we are ready to switch from color 1 and color 2 to color 3. So we have our main color, color 1, and our contrast color 2 would be, you know, color 3. Anyway, you get it. Just look at your chart, follow along, do what the chart says, and I will see you guys back here. Okay, I am approaching the end of round 4, which was an all purple round. So whenever I reached the end of round 3 and I did my last stitch in the green, I went ahead and just broke that yarn. So that's what that tail is here. So I'm just kind of helping to pull that stitch tight as I'm knitting in it. So that's the end of round 4. Now I'm going to knit round 5, and with round 5, I'm going to be adding my third color, or my contrast color 2, which is my brown, right here, my brown. So I have the tail here. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did before, which is make a slip knot, and I will slide this on before I do my stitch. So I have 3 purples. 1, 2, 3, and then I have 1 brown. So I'm going to slide this on. This will be dropped off when I'm done, and get my yarn set up and ready to continue. Now, even though I'm adding a new color, I am still going to keep the purple in the same position that it was before. So it's not a, you know, I had my purple on my left and my green on my right. I'm going to continue with my purple on my left until I'm done with it. I'm not going to take my purple and move it to my right to add a new color. If I did that, then one half, the bottom half of my purple color, this here, we'll look at this example. This is the section that I'm on right now. If I switched my position, then this half would look different than this half, and that is not what I want, okay? So I'm going to proceed to knit. So there's 1 brown and 5 purple. So 1, 2, 3. My kids are fighting over movie choices in the background. I apologize. 4, 5. I know if you guys have kids or have grandkids and you've experienced this, so it's nothing new for you, but I don't want you to be like, what is that random yelling in the... It's not my loud neighbors, it's my children. So then I spread my stitches out and I do 1 brown. And then I have 2 purple, and I will continue on to knit around. So I'm going to continue to knit, and you do all of the color work the same. I am not going to trap floats on this color work because I did not like the way that it looked here. When I trapping your floats is what they call securing your stitches in the background so your float is not really, really long. I am not going to do that in this color work because if you have a big contrast in colors, it's gonna pop up. So my purple, when I trapped my purple floats in this section here, it showed through. So I'm not going to trap the floats there. However, if that is something that you want to do, I will put a link to a really good video that will help you in trapping the floats. So when you get to that point, you can watch that video. The longest section of stitches is 10 stitches, and that's okay for me. I can go 10 stitches without trapping the float. I will just make sure that I spread my stitches out on the needle and it won't be bad. Again, if you need help with this part, you can come to see me in the shop. But I'm just going to continue on doing the colorwork section, and this will be the end of this video, and I will see you guys in the next video switching from colorwork to the rest of the body of your hat and decreases.